Breakfast. 5 a.m. sharp for my wife's sake, Dane said, as if I were staff he'd hired for the weekend. He stood in the middle of my kitchen with the certainty of someone who'd long forgotten the difference between asking and ordering. Mara didn't bother with a greeting. She slid her sunglasses higher on her nose and added, "No onions, soft butter, and nothing burnt." They had arrived the night before without a call, without warning, just the sound of tires on gravel, and the front door swinging open like a commercial break had ended, and they were returning to their set. I'd barely gotten a word in before their luggage was carried down the hallway. The good towels taken from the linen cupboard, and the thermostat adjusted to a temperature I never used. Now they were dictating breakfast. I looked at Dane for a moment longer than he expected. His shoulders tightened as if even my silence accused him of something he didn't want to acknowledge. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I simply nodded and reached for the small clock on the counter, turning the dial until the alarm settled on 4 a.m. Dane gave a satisfied exhale. Mara inspected the fridge as though checking inventory in a kitchen she hadn't bought yet. "We'll be up early," she said, closing the door with her hip. "Hope you don't mind noise." I said nothing. Noise was the least of my concerns. It was the way the house felt full but hollow at the same time, like they'd displaced the air itself. Every room had a new shape with them in it, and none of it belonged to me anymore, not the way it used to. They drifted down the hall, talking low, murmuring plans I wasn't invited to hear. I stayed where I was, hand resting on the cold metal of the oven handle, listening to their footsteps fade into my own walls. Then I turned off the kitchen light, walked slowly to my room, and placed the alarm clock beside my bed, already awake inside, long before it would sound. I lay down, knowing I would rise before the ringing ever came, because something had already pulled me out of sleep. Something that pushed me toward the moment when I would hear whatever they whispered next. By the time the coffee finished brewing, the house no longer felt like mine. Suitcases lined the edge of my bedroom wall. Not the guest room, mine. Mara's robe hung behind the door, thin silk brushing against the frame each time it moved. Her cosmetics were already arranged beside my moisturizer. My name scratched off the lid with a careless thumb. I went to the hall bathroom to wash my face and stopped short. Her toothbrush, bright coral pink, stood in the glass where mine used to sit. I hadn't even noticed it was gone. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter to steady my breath. That's when I saw it folded neatly beside the fruit bowl. A yellow notepad with Mara's looping handwriting. I recognized the pens she liked. The same ones I used to send in Dane's school supply bags when he was 10. It read like a checklist. No onions. Salted butter only. Replace curtains, shears are tacky. Get signature before Friday. Tell him not to push too hard. I felt the temperature shift inside me, cold but clear. I moved the notepad just an inch, and there it was, partially hidden beneath it. A legal form. Transfer of residence. Signature pending. My name sat centered on the page in bold block letters. Not written. Typed. They hadn't just come to visit. They'd come prepared. I carried the paper to the kitchen drawer and slid it beneath the dish towels. I wasn't ready to confront it, but I wouldn't leave it where they could hide it again. When I closed the drawer, I heard them laughing down the hall. Something about brunch in town. Something about me being sweet but slow lately. I wiped my hands on a cloth I didn't remember folding and glanced once more at the list. Then I stepped outside, past the screen door and into the yard. I needed to speak with someone who still remembered who I used to be before silence became my default setting. Ramona was trimming back her hydrangeas when I stepped onto the edge of her yard. She looked up, squinting slightly, then set her shears down on the porch rail without a word. She knew something was wrong before I opened my mouth. "They're not visiting," I said quietly. "They're circling." She motioned me up the steps, pulled off her gloves, and poured us each a glass of iced tea without asking. Her hands were still steady, even after all those years off the force. Retired NYPD or not, Ramona's instincts had never dulled. They left a legal form out, I told her. Transfer of residence. My name's already typed in. She raised one eyebrow. They show it to you yet? No. I found it under a grocery list. But it's clear enough what they're after. She leaned back in her chair, watching the breeze twist through the trees. You want me to talk to them? I shook my head. Not yet. I'm not trying to stop them. I just want to hear what they say when they think I'm not listening. Ramona disappeared into her house for a few minutes. When she returned, she held a small black recorder no bigger than a key fob. Voice activated, she said. Battery lasts about a week. Tape it under your table. I took it in my hand and stared at the smooth, blank surface. It felt lighter than it should have. They're expecting breakfast tomorrow, I said. 5 sharp. Ramona smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then give them a show. Just let it run. I don't plan to argue, I said. I won't accuse them of anything. You don't have to, she replied. Let their own words do the work. The sun had started to lower behind the roofline when I made my way back to my house. I stepped over their shoes in the entryway past the coats hung on my hooks and went straight to the dining room table. My hands didn't shake as I reached beneath it and pressed the recorder into place. The clock read 4:03 when I stepped into the kitchen. I didn't bother turning on all the lights, just the one above the stove. It gave me enough to see the skillet and the coffee pot, but not enough to reveal my face. The eggs went in first, then the bread. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting the sounds of cooking cover their voices at the table. She can't hear us, Mara whispered. Her voice was tight-clipped. I didn't turn. She barely listens anymore, Dane said. We'll have her sign after breakfast. Just ease her into it. She won't notice. Won't notice, she repeated a little scoff beneath the words. She still folds towels like it's 1994. Probably thinks this house runs on manners and nostalgia. I added 2 sugars to the coffee. Stirred. Set the mugs down without looking back. She'll forget she even owned it, Dane said. We just need her signature, and it's done. Mara let out a long breath. Let's just get it over with. I want this place cleared out by spring. That guest room is freezing. She'll go along with it, Dane replied. She always does. You just have to smile the right way. My hand hovered over the butter dish, steady as ever. Beneath the lace table runner behind me, I knew the recorder was quietly blinking to life, catching every word. It didn't need clarity. It needed intent, and that was loud enough. Breakfast is ready, I said, turning at last. They both looked up and smiled. Mara adjusted her robe. Dane stretched his arms and gave a little groan, like he'd just woken from some beautiful, well-earned sleep. They didn't know I'd already been awake for hours, that I hadn't slept much since they arrived. I placed their plates gently on the table and returned to the stove to make my own. 1 egg. Half a slice of toast. Enough to keep my hands moving, but not enough to distract my thoughts. They chatted between bites, all sweet tones and harmless comments now. But I was already thinking about what I'd serve next. Dane found me in the living room that afternoon, sorting through a stack of old mail I'd already gone through twice. He stood in the doorway for a moment, holding the paper with a practiced casualness that didn't match his eyes. Mom, he said, stepping forward. I need your signature on something. It's nothing serious, just a routine form for the house. Legal stuff. Makes things easier in the long run. He placed the document on the coffee table and pushed a pen toward me. Just sign at the bottom. I'll take care of the filing. I didn't look down right away. Instead, I studied his face, the tightness around his mouth, the impatience in the way he shifted his weight, the faint tremor in his fingers. He wasn't nervous about the signature. He was nervous about me. I sat back, lifted the pen, and without a word, placed my name neatly on the line he indicated. His shoulders loosened just slightly as if he'd been holding a breath. That moment of relief was almost tender. Almost. Before he could pick up the paper, I reached for the folder I had tucked beneath the armchair cushion and set it gently beside his form. "This one needs your attention too," I said. His eyes flicked down. "Cease and desist. Unauthorized property claim. Prepared by a law firm he didn't recognize." Ramona's contact had formatted it cleanly, professionally, no room for misinterpretation. He stared at the heading for a long moment, then looked up at me as though he were searching for someone else behind my eyes. "What is this?" he asked. "My response," I said. His jaw tightened. A vein near his temple pulsed. He didn't touch the paper again. "You signed mine," he said. Voice low. "And I filed mine," I replied. Silence stretched between us, heavy and strange. Dane wasn't used to being met with resistance, especially not from me. I watched the recognition move through him, slow and cold, like he was finally seeing me as someone with a spine he hadn't counted on. He left the room without another word, and I stayed where I was, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall while I considered what the evening might bring. I found Mara standing at the end of the hallway. That evening, arms folded, eyes fixed on a smudge in the floor tile, like it might offer her a way out. She didn't look up right away. I had been walking toward the linen closet, but something in her stillness made me stop. "You think I pushed him into this?" she said, her voice quiet but not afraid. I didn't answer. Silence was no longer hesitation, it was choice. She let out a breath. "He told me you didn't care much about him growing up, that you were always too busy, too cold. Said this house was his birthright, that you were just holding on to something that should have been passed on." Still, I said nothing. "I didn't know about the papers until a week ago," she added. "But by then, he said you'd go along with it, that you always do." Her voice caught. "I didn't think you'd notice." I finally looked at her. She wasn't crying, but her jaw was clenched like she was holding something back. Pride or guilt, I couldn't tell which. I wanted to ask if she believed him. If she looked at the photos on the mantel and still thought they showed a cold mother. If the breakfast I made that morning tasted like indifference. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer, because her pause said more than her words ever could. I walked past her and reached for the switch. The hallway dimmed with a soft click. "Good night," I said. She didn't reply. I left her standing in the dark corridor, framed by family pictures she hadn't taken the time to look at since arriving. Ones where Dane was 5'7", 10, grinning with crooked teeth and arms wrapped around the woman she claimed had never been warm. Back in my room, I closed the door gently behind me and sat at the edge of the bed, waiting for the soft click of their own door closing down the hall. It came later than I expected, like something was unraveling slower than they'd planned. I woke before the alarm again, though I let it ring once before I turned it off. The rhythm of the morning was unchanged. Grind the coffee crack, the eggs slice the bread, but this time I added cinnamon to the toast, just enough to warm the air. Dane was the first to enter. He sniffed the kitchen and stopped short. His face folding the way it used to when he was 8 and didn't like the smell of anything unfamiliar. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing the plate. "My house," I said calmly. "My recipe." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then glanced at the table and saw his usual seat already set. He sat down, but didn't reach for the food. Mara came in a moment later looking like she hadn't slept. She greeted me more softly than usual, asked for coffee, then sat beside him without a word. They ate, but slowly. The usual chatter was gone. No brunch plans, no jokes about my decor, just forks tapping plates and eyes that didn't linger long on mine. I cleaned as they finished. No one offered help. They never did. By noon, I heard the soft knock on the back door. I didn't need to ask who it was. Ramona stood with a neutral expression and handed me a plain white envelope. No seal, no logo, just wait. I nodded and thanked her. She didn't stay. Inside transcripts. Audio files. Legal documentation of intent to coerce. Ramona's contact had packaged everything neatly. It wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but it was solid. I slid the envelope behind the sugar jar in the cabinet, tucked just far enough back where no one would reach unless they were searching for sweetness they didn't deserve. Back in the living room, Dane and Mara were pretending to read. A magazine upside down. A phone screen dark. They were waiting, but they didn't know for what. I stood in the hallway a moment longer than I needed to, listening to the stillness that had settled between them. Then I went to the front closet and reached for the folder marked Next Steps. Dane burst into the kitchen like he'd been holding his breath since morning. His face was red eyes, sharp fists curled around a paper he waved in the air. "You tricked me," he snapped. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at the paper. I was folding dish towels one edge to the next, steady and straight. I signed what was mine, I said. "You handed me a document. I handed you one back. You knew exactly what I meant. I know exactly what I've lived in, paid for, fixed and protected for 37 years. I know who planted the dogwoods in the front yard, who paid off the mortgage, and who slept with one ear open through every storm just in case the windows rattled. Do you?" He looked like he wanted to answer, but hadn't studied for the test. Mara appeared behind him in the doorway, quieter than usual. Her arms were crossed, but not defensive, more like she was holding herself together. "She had it ready," Dane said to her, voice rising. "All of it. The legal stuff, the recording, this was all planned." Mara didn't respond. She looked at me, not with anger, but with something closer to disbelief. Not because I'd fought back, but because I'd done it without ever raising my voice. "Were you always like this?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "But I've had time to learn." Dane stormed out first, the screen door snapping behind him. Mara lingered a second longer, then followed her footsteps slower. I turned back to the towels and finished folding the last one. The corners lined up neatly. I placed them on the shelf and closed the cabinet with care. The call came just after lunch. I let it ring twice before picking up, wiping my hands on a dish towel as I answered. "It's done," my lawyer said. "He tried to file the deed transfer this morning." My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the counter. And denied. Flag already in place. Ramona's contact handled it well. It triggered the fraud watch before it even hit processing. His name's now attached to a restricted inquiry. We've also frozen any credit actions in your name just in case. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not from relief, but from release. Like something old had finally been set down. "Thank you," I said. "Keep that cease and desist on file. If they try anything else, it's already logged." I nodded, though he couldn't see. After we hung up, I stood there a moment longer in the quiet kitchen, breathing in the stillness like I hadn't been able to since they arrived. Then I went outside. The garden had been neglected while they were here. Nothing serious, just the kind of small mess that comes when your energy is pulled elsewhere. But the marigolds were still standing tall, golden and bright, soft petals bobbing gently in the wind. I chose the fullest ones, clipping stems carefully and brushing the dirt from the leaves. My basket filled quickly. They smelled like the start of something clean. Inside, I placed the bouquet in the old blue glass vase, the one Dane once knocked over when he was 5 and cried about for a week. I trimmed the stems again just to make them sit right and set the vase in the center of the table where the recorder had once been. No more signatures. No more recordings. No more pretending I didn't see what was in front of me. I wasn't defending my name anymore. I was reclaiming the rooms, the corners, the silence. One drawer, pull one open window at a time. Then I walked down the hall and opened the guest room door. It was time to finish what I'd started. A week passed before anything arrived. Just a single envelope in the mail slot, no return address, no weight to it, but its presence. Inside, one line in Mara's handwriting, "I'm sorry about the list." No greeting. No explanation. No name signed. Just those 6 words. I stood at the counter for a long moment, holding the paper between my fingers. Then I folded it neatly twice, and placed it in the drawer beside the cease and desist letter. Not out of bitterness. Just out of record. A small archive of the things I no longer had to argue about. That morning, breakfast was quiet. No demands. No early wake-up. No list left on the counter. Just cinnamon toast in the center of the table. The smell had settled into the walls again, warm and steady like it belonged there. I brewed a second cup of coffee, though I only planned to drink one. Force of habit. The jar of cinnamon sat beside the sugar bowl, now not tucked away, not hidden in the spice rack like it used to be. I'd moved it without thinking. Or maybe I had. The guest room was empty. The bedding had been washed, the drawers cleared of everything but lavender sachets. No shoes in the hallway, no unfamiliar toothbrush in my glass. Just my things right where I left them. Outside, the wind had picked up. I cracked the window open just an inch to let it pass through. It smelled like clean counters and cool earth. I sat at the table, sliced into the toast, and took a bite. It was a little heavy on the cinnamon. I didn't mind. I wasn't expecting anyone. But if someone did come, they'd see the jar right there beside the coffee. And they'd know. This house knows what belongs to it. And I do too.